The dust hung in the air like something living. Jacob Mercer stood at the edge of the main street in a town that had no name worth remembering, watching the crowd thin as the sun dropped behind the ridge. The auction had ended an hour ago. Cattle, horses, a few wagons, all sold to men with deeper pockets or louder voices. He'd come for a workhorse, something steady to pull the plow come spring. He'd left empty-handed. But he hadn't left yet. He stood there because something didn't sit right. A feeling in his gut, the kind that used to wake him during the war when the picket line went too quiet. Across the street, near the livery, a man in a worn suit and a bowler hat was speaking to a small group. Not selling, collecting. 5 children stood in a loose line before him, their hands held stiffly at their sides. The oldest couldn't have been more than 12. The youngest was maybe 4, barefoot, gripping the hem of her sister's dress. Jacob's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before, not here, not like this, but he knew what it was. The man in the bowler hat handed a folded paper to a woman in a dark shawl. She took it without looking at the children. The man gestured, and the oldest boy, thin, pale, with a shock of black hair, stepped forward. The woman shook her head, pointed to the girl beside him instead, the girl with braids and hollow eyes. Jacob's boots hit the dirt before he decided to move. He crossed the street slowly, not in a hurry, but deliberate, his hat brim low, his hands loose. He'd learned long ago that men like the one in the bowler noticed everything. "Excuse me," Jacob said, his voice even. The man turned. His smile was too wide, too rehearsed. "Auction's over, friend, unless you're here for the estate sale tomorrow." "I'm here now." The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. These children are wards of the county, being placed into good Christian homes, all legal and proper. Jacob glanced at the 5 of them. The oldest boy met his gaze and held it. There was no fear there, just a kind of exhausted defiance, like a man who'd been beaten but refused to kneel. "They siblings?" Jacob asked. "They are. You splitting them up?" The man's smile thinned. "Practicality, friend. Families can take 1, maybe 2. 5 is a burden no one's willing to shoulder." He said it like it was obvious, like it was kindness. Jacob looked back at the children. The smallest girl had started to cry, silent tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. The girl with the braids pulled her closer, whispering something Jacob couldn't hear. "How much?" Jacob said. The man blinked. "Pardon. How much to take all 5? The man's expression shifted, surprise, then calculation. "You're serious?" "I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't." The man studied him. Jacob knew what he saw. A man past 40, lean and weathered, no wedding ring, no sign of wealth. A drifter maybe, or worse. "You got a wife?" the man asked. "No. A home. A ranch 10 miles west, small but it's mine." The man folded his arms. The county doesn't just hand over children to any man with land. There are questions, references, a fee. "How much?" The man paused, then he named a figure. It was more than Jacob had in his pocket, more than he'd brought to town, but not more than he had buried in a coffee tin beneath the floorboards of his barn. "I'll have it by morning," Jacob said. The man's eyes narrowed. "Morning's too late. The girl's already spoken for, and the boy," he nodded toward the oldest. "He'll go to the mill, strong enough to work." Jacob's hand moved to his belt, resting near the old colt he rarely drew anymore. Not a threat, just a presence. "I'll have it in an hour," Jacob said quietly. The man in the bowler studied him for a long moment. Then he glanced at the children, at the fading crowd, at the woman in the shawl who had already turned away. "1 hour," the man said, "and I'll need to see the bills before I sign anything." Jacob nodded once. He turned to leave, then stopped. He looked back at the children, all 5 of them now watching him with something close to hope, or maybe just confusion. "You stay right here," Jacob said. "Don't go anywhere." The oldest boy nodded. Jacob walked back toward the general store, his mind already moving through what he'd need to do. The money was there, that wasn't the problem. The problem was what came after. 5 children, no wife, no help, winter coming in 6 weeks. He thought about turning around, about letting it go, about riding home alone like he'd planned. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the smallest girl's tears. He saw the boy's defiance. He saw the way they stood together even when the world was pulling them apart. He didn't turn around. An hour later, Jacob returned with a leather pouch. The man in the bowler counted the bills twice, lips moving silently. Then he produced a ledger, a pen, and a single sheet of paper that Jacob signed without reading. "There, your resp. Responsibility now," the man said, tucking the money into his coat. "Legal and binding. You default, the county takes them back, and you." Jacob didn't answer. He turned to the children. They stood in the same line, watching him with wide eyes. The oldest boy's fists were clenched. The girl with the braids had stopped crying, but her hand still gripped the youngest's shoulder. Jacob crouched down, so he was eye level with them. "I don't know your names yet," he said, "and I don't know what you've been through, but I'm not splitting you up. You're coming with me, all of you." For a moment, no one moved. Then the oldest boy spoke, his voice rough. "Why?" Jacob met his gaze, because no one else would. The boy's jaw tightened, then slowly he nodded. Jacob stood. He looked at all 5 of them, their torn clothes, their bare feet, their faces smudged with dust and fear. "All of you," he said quietly, "come with me." The oldest boy reached out and took the hand of the girl beside him. She took the hand of the next. One by one, they linked together, a chain of small, trembling fingers. And then they followed him home. The wagon rattled over the hard-packed road as the sun bled out across the hills. Jacob didn't speak, and neither did the children. They sat in the back, pressed together like a litter of stray dogs, unsure whether they'd been saved or sold. The oldest boy sat closest to the edge, his eyes scanning the landscape. The girl with the braids held the youngest in her lap, rocking her gently even though the little one had stopped crying miles ago. The 2 middle children, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 and 8, sat between them, silent and still. Jacob had learned their names before they left town. The oldest was Thomas, 12, maybe 13. The girl with the braids was Anna, 10. Then came Samuel and Grace, the middle pair. The youngest was Lily, 4 years old, with eyes too big for her face. Thomas had given the names like a roll call. No stories, no explanations, just names. Jacob didn't push. They reached the ranch as the last light drained from the sky. It wasn't much, a small house, a barn, a chicken coop that leaned like it had been holding its breath for years. The land stretched out in all directions, dry and stubborn, the kind of place that fought you every season. Jacob climbed down from the wagon and held out a hand to help them down. Thomas ignored it and jumped, landing hard. The others followed, slower, cautious. "This is it," Jacob said. Thomas looked at the house, then back at Jacob. "You live here alone." "I do." "Why?" Jacob paused. "Because I wanted to." Thomas didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Jacob led them inside. The house was dim, sparse. A table, a few chairs, a stove that worked when it felt like it. One bedroom, a loft above the main room, accessible by a narrow ladder. "You 5 can take the loft," Jacob said. "I'll sleep down here." Anna spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. "Where's your wife?" "Don't have one." "Did she die?" Jacob's throat tightened. "No, I never married." Anna looked around the room, her face unreadable. "Then why'd you take us?" It was the same question Thomas had asked. The same question Jacob had been asking himself for the last 10 miles. "Because you needed someone too," he said finally. Anna's eyes lingered on him a moment longer. Then she nodded and turned to help Lily up the ladder. Jacob watched them settle in, their movements careful, like they were afraid to take up too much space. He lit the stove and set a pot of water to boil. There wasn't much food, some dried beef, cornmeal, a few potatoes. He'd have to go back to town tomorrow, buy more. He hadn't planned for 5 extra mouths. He hadn't planned for any of this. By the time the stew was ready, the children had climbed back down and sat at the table. Jacob served them in silence, and they ate the same way. No one spoke. No one met his eyes. When they finished, Anna helped clear the plates. Thomas stood by the door, arms crossed, watching Jacob like he was waiting for something to go wrong. "You got questions," Jacob said. "Ask them." Thomas's jaw worked. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing. Everyone wants something." Jacob set the last plate down. "I want you to stay alive, that's it." "Why should we believe you?" Jacob looked at him, really looked at him. Thomas was too young to be this hard, too young to carry the weight Jacob saw in his eyes. "You shouldn't," Jacob said quietly. "Not yet." Thomas blinked, surprised by the honesty. "But you will," Jacob added. "Give it time." Anna stepped forward, her voice cautious. "Are you going to make us work?" "I'm going to teach you how to survive out here. That means work, yeah, but I'm not going to beat you for it, and I'm not going to sell you if you don't." Grace, the middle girl, whispered something to Samuel. He shook his head. "What?" Jacob asked. Grace looked up, her voice barely audible. "Are you going to hit us?" Jacob's chest tightened. He crouched down so he was at her level. "No," he said, "I'm not. Even if we're bad. Even then." Grace studied him, her eyes searching for the lie. Then she nodded just once. Jacob stood and gestured toward the loft. "Get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." They climbed the ladder one by one. Lily went first, Anna behind her. Samuel and Grace followed. Thomas went last, pausing at the top to look back at Jacob. "Thank you," Thomas said, the words stiff and uncertain. Jacob nodded. "Get some rest." Thomas disappeared into the shadows. Jacob sat by the stove, staring into the dying embers. He thought about what he'd done, about the money he'd spent, about the 5 lives now tangled up with his. He thought about the war, about the men he'd lost, about the promises he'd made and broken. And he thought about the girl's question, "Why'd you take us?" Because he'd seen too many people walk away. Because he'd walked away too many times himself. Because this time, he didn't want to. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Jacob closed his eyes and listened to the sound of 5 children breathing above him. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty. 3 days passed like a held breath. Jacob taught them how to draw water from the well, how to feed the chickens, how to recognize the difference between a rattlesnake track and a lizard's. Thomas worked without complaint, his movements sharp and efficient. Anna kept the younger ones close, always watching, always counting heads. Samuel and Grace stayed quiet, but they learned fast. Lily followed Anna everywhere, her small hand never far from her sister's skirt. They didn't smile, they didn't play, but they didn't flinch anymore when Jacob moved too quickly. It was something. On the 4th morning, Jacob rode into town for supplies. He left Thomas in charge, told him to keep the door locked and the rifle loaded. Thomas had nodded, his face serious, and Jacob had ridden off with a knot of unease in his gut he couldn't name. He returned 3 hours later to find a horse tied outside his house. Jacob's hand went to his colt before his boots hit the ground. The horse was lean, well kept. A saddlebag hung from one side, empty, no brand, no marking, but Jacob recognized the dust pattern on the flanks. It had come from the direction of town. He dismounted slowly, his eyes on the door. It was closed, no movement inside. Then he heard it, a low voice, calm and cold. "You can come in, Mercer. Your kids are fine." Jacob's blood went still. He pushed the door open. The man from the auction, the one in the bowler hat, sat at Jacob's table, a cup of coffee in his hands. Thomas stood near the ladder, the rifle in his grip, but not aimed, not yet. Anna had the younger ones behind her, their faces pale. "Relax," the man said, smiling that same rehearsed smile. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Jacob stepped inside, his hand still on his colt. "Then why are you here?" The man set the cup down gently. "Because I've been hearing things, questions, people asking about the man who bought 5 children in one go. People wondering what kind of man does that. People should mind their business." "They should," the man agreed, "but they don't. And when they don't, men like me get visits from men like the sheriff and the county clerk and a very concerned reverend who seems to think you might not be suitable." Jacob's jaw tightened. "I signed the papers, it's legal." "It is," the man said, "but legality and morality aren't always the same thing, are they?" He leaned back, his fingers tapping the table. "See, some folks think a single man, no wife, no family, taking in 5 children, well, it looks suspicious. I don't care how it looks." "You should," the man's smile faded, "because if enough people start asking questions, the county can take them back. All I have to do is say you're unfit, and I've been asked to do exactly that." Thomas's knuckles went white on the rifle. Jacob didn't move. "Who asked you?" "The Harrisons." Jacob's stomach dropped. The Harrisons owned half the county, land, cattle, the mill, the bank. They were the kind of people who didn't ask for things, they took them, and if they wanted something, they got it. "They want the boy," the man continued, nodding toward Thomas. "Strong, smart, good age for labor. They'll pay well for him, more than you did." Thomas took a step forward, but Anna grabbed his arm. Jacob's voice went low and flat. "He's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mercer. You just have to name the right price." "I already named it, and you already took it." The man sighed like he was dealing with a stubborn child. "I tried to do this the easy way, but if you won't cooperate, the Harrisons will go through the county. They'll say you're unfit. They'll say the children aren't safe, and they'll take all 5, and you'll lose everything." Jacob's hand moved to his colt, and this time he drew it. The man didn't flinch. He just raised his hands slowly, still smiling. "Careful, Mercer. You shoot me, you prove them right." Jacob held the gun steady, his finger resting against the trigger guard. "Get out." The man stood slowly, adjusting his hat. "You've got 3 days. After that, the county comes, and when they do, these kids won't be yours anymore." He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. "You did a good thing, Mercer, but good things don't last out here. You should know that by now." He left. Jacob stood frozen, the colt still in his hand, his heart hammering against his ribs. Thomas lowered the rifle, his voice shook. "They're going to take us." Jacob turned to him. "No, they're not." "You heard him." "I don't care what I heard." Jacob holstered the gun. "You're not going anywhere." Anna's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "What are you going to do?" Jacob looked at her, at all of them. 5 faces, 5 lives, 5 reasons not to run. "I'm going to fight," he said. Thomas's jaw tightened. "How?" Jacob didn't answer, because he didn't know yet. But he knew one thing: he'd bought them for a reason, and he wasn't going to let anyone take them back. Not the Harrisons, not the county, not anyone. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. Inside, 5 children stood in the dim light, waiting to see if the man who'd bought their freedom could keep it. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat by the stove, the fire burned down to coals, his mind turning over every angle, every option. He could run, pack the kids up, head west, disappear into the territories, but the Harrisons had reach, and running would only prove he had something to hide. He could fight, but not with a gun, not this time. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He rose quietly, pulled on his coat, and checked the loft. All 5 were still asleep, tangled together in a pile of blankets like a nest of sparrows. Anna's arm was draped over Lily. Thomas's hand rested on Samuel's shoulder. They looked smaller in sleep, younger. Jacob turned away before the ache in his chest could settle. He saddled his horse and rode into town before the sun cleared the ridge. The streets were empty, the storefronts dark. He tied his horse outside the sheriff's office and knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. The door opened. Sheriff Brennan stood in the doorway, suspenders hanging loose, his eyes still heavy with sleep. "Mercer," he said, "it's not even 6. I need to talk to you." Brennan sighed, stepped aside. "Come in." Jacob entered. The office smelled like old coffee and tobacco. Brennan poured himself a cup and didn't offer Jacob one. "This about the kids?" Brennan asked. "It is." Brennan nodded slowly, figured as much. "Harrisons came by yesterday, said you might not be fit to keep them." "And what you say?" "I said I'd look into it." Jacob's jaw tightened. "I signed the papers, it's legal." "It is," Brennan agreed, "but legal doesn't mean right. And a man alone, no wife, 5 kids," he shrugged. "People talk." "Let them." Brennan studied him. "You really want to fight the Harrisons over this?" "I really want to keep what's mine." "Those kids aren't property, Mercer." "I know that." Jacob's voice was low, controlled. "But they're mine to protect, and I'm not letting anyone take them." Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he set his cup down. "You know what you're asking," he said. "The Harrisons don't lose, not in this county." "Then I'll be the first." Brennan shook his head. "You're a fool." "Maybe." Brennan sighed. "I'll hold them off as long as I can, but you better have a plan, Mercer, because when the county comes, I can't stop them." Jacob nodded. "I'll have one." He left before Brennan could say anything else. By the time he returned to the ranch, the sun was high. The children were awake, gathered around the table. Anna had made cornbread. It was burnt on one side, but no one complained. Thomas looked up when Jacob walked in. "Where'd you go?" "Town." "Why?" "To buy us time." Thomas frowned, but he didn't push. Jacob sat down at the table. For the first time since they'd arrived, he didn't eat in silence. "I need to know your story," Jacob said. Anna looked up wary. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to fight for you, I need to know what I'm fighting for." The children exchanged glances. Then Thomas spoke, his voice flat. "Our parents died last spring. Fever. We had an aunt, but she didn't want us. Said 5 was too many, so the county took us, split us up at first. I went to a farm. Anna went to a boarding house. The others went to different places." He paused. "We ran away, found each other. They caught us, put us in the auction." Jacob's chest tightened. "And before that?" Thomas shrugged. "Before that, we were just a family." Anna's voice was quieter. "We had a house, a garden. Mama used to sing." Lily, sitting in Anna's lap, whispered something. Anna smiled just a little. "She wants to know if you'll keep us." Jacob looked at each of them. Thomas's hard eyes, Anna's quiet strength, Samuel's uncertainty, Grace's hope, Lily's trust. "Yes," Jacob said, "I will." Thomas's jaw tightened. "You can't promise that." "I just did." "What if they take us anyway?" Jacob leaned forward. "Then I'll come get you." Thomas stared at him. Then slowly, something in his face softened. Anna reached across the table and placed her hand on Jacob's. "Thank you," she said. Jacob nodded. He didn't trust his voice. That night, after the children went to bed, Jacob sat outside and watched the stars. The wind was cool, the sky endless. He thought about the choice he'd made, about the fight ahead, about what it meant to protect something fragile in a world that broke everything it touched. And he thought about Anna's hand on his. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with trust. He wasn't going to let them down. The Harrisons came on the 3rd day. Jacob saw the dust cloud from a mile off, 3 riders moving fast. He stood in the yard, the children behind him, and waited. Thomas held the rifle. Jacob had told him not to, but the boy refused to let it go. The riders slowed as they approached. 2 men Jacob didn't recognize, hired hands probably, and in the center, Edward Harrison himself, tall, silver-haired, dressed like he was attending a funeral. Harrison dismounted slowly, his eyes sweeping over the ranch, the children, Jacob. Mercer, he said, his voice smooth. Harrison, I'll make this simple. I'm here for the boy. Jacob didn't move. He's not yours. He will be. The county's already signed the order. All I need is the sheriff's approval, and I'll have that by sundown. Brennan won't sign. Harrison smiled. Brennan will do what he's told. Jacob's hand rested near his colt. The boy stays. Harrison's smile faded. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be the first. Harrison's eyes flicked to Thomas, to the rifle in his hands, then back to Jacob. You think you can fight me? Harrison asked. I own this county, I own the law, I own the land you're standing on. You don't own them. Harrison's expression hardened. Step aside, Mercer, or I'll have you removed. Jacob took a step forward. Try. For a moment, no one moved. Then, from behind Jacob, a voice. Sheriff Brennan's. That's enough. Jacob turned. Brennan sat on his horse at the edge of the property, his hand resting on his belt. He'd come alone. Harrison's jaw tightened. Brennan, you're late. I'm right on time. Brennan dismounted. And I'm here to tell you the county's not signing anything. Harrison's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I spoke to the clerk this morning. Turns out Mercer's paperwork is in order, legal and binding. No grounds to remove the children. There are always grounds. Not this time. Brennan's voice was firm. You want the boy, you'll have to go through me. Harrison stared at him, then he laughed, low and bitter. You're throwing away your career for this. Maybe. Harrison shook his head. You're both fools. He turned and mounted his horse. His men followed. As they rode away, Harrison looked back one last time. This isn't over, he said. Jacob watched until they disappeared into the dust. Then he turned to Brennan. Why? Jacob asked. Brennan shrugged. Because you were right, they're yours to protect. He tipped his hat. Good luck, Mercer. He rode off. Jacob stood in the yard, his heart still pounding, his hands shaking. Thomas lowered the rifle. Is it over? Jacob looked at him, at all of them. Yeah, he said, it's over. Anna stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Jacob's waist, then Lily, then Samuel and Grace. Thomas stood apart, watching. Then, slowly, he walked over and placed a hand on Jacob's shoulder. Thank you, Thomas said. Jacob's throat tightened. He nodded. That night they ate together. Anna's cornbread was less burnt. Lily laughed at something Samuel said. Grace smiled. And for the first time, the house felt like a home. Years later, long after the children had grown and scattered across the West, Thomas to a ranch of his own, Anna to a teaching post in Denver, the others to lives they'd built with their own hands, Jacob would sit on his porch and watch the sun set over the hills. He never remarried, never left the ranch. But he was never alone. Because on quiet evenings, when the wind was right, he could still hear them, 5 voices linked together calling him home. And he would smile.